Thank you. Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to this fellowship FAQ session. I am going to ask if everyone except for the speakers can make sure you're on mute and make sure that your cameras are turned off just to help everybody with their bandwidth. That would be fantastic. And I am going to share some slides. Thank you. Right, bear with me a second. Okay, so Blakely, can you just confirm you can see my main slides?
Not yet, no.
Okay, what is my computer doing? Let's try it this way then. Can you see now?
Can you start have you started the slideshow?
I'm just about to. There you go. Is it in slideshow mode now?
That's in the right one. That's correct, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so hopefully everyone can now see my slides. Okay, so I am Sam Vermaak. As most of you hopefully know by now, I'm the Validate co-investigator and executive manager based at University of Oxford. So in this session, as you all know, we have opened a new fellowship call for 2024. So in this session, we're hoping to help you with this a little bit. It's only going to be an hour, so it is going to be a bit of a quick run through, but we should have some time for questions and answers at the end. I will give a quick overview of the call and some tips and advice from my experience writing grants and also reviewing all the ones or being on the review panel with all the Validate applications. And then I'm going to hand over to a couple of other people. So we have Professor Helena Kuvanini online, who is going to be talking about the grant writing support, like Helena, that we have, that she will be offering to LMIC applicants. And then we have Dr. Nastasia Creel and Dr. Christian Segura-Serda, who are our current fellows, who are going to give us a quick talk about their experiences and some tips, as I say, as current fellows who have been through this process before. Okay, so I'll start. Right, so I'm hoping that everybody has taken our advice and read through the guidance and the FAQs so that most of this is just confirming what you've already read and hopefully explaining it further if you need that. So our fellowships aim to fund 2 years' salary and consumables for you to be able to do an independent scientific research project. And obviously the aim of the fellowships is for their grant to act as a stepping stone to your becoming a principal investigator and or a group leader. And by giving you experience of leading and managing your own project, working as your own PI, leading the project, of grant and financial management, which you may not have done before and are quite skills to learn, and obviously the project management as well. And then fellows actually get to be part of our network management board. So you also get experience on the board itself, networking and connecting with our other network management board senior members, and also RNMB review applications. So you would get experience in reviewing other people's applications and just seeing our strategic planning and how we make Validate work behind the scenes. So that is quite a useful experience, we think, as well. Okay, so eligibility. You need to be an associate Validate member and not have received a prior Validate fellowship. You can work on any of our Validate focused pathogens, and you can work at any type of organization or institution. Both high-income country and lower middle-income country members are eligible, but you do have different application criteria depending on whether you're HIC or LMIC. So you need to follow the guidance document to work out which one you fall under. And you'll see online, we've got a link to the document. Any country listed there counts as LMIC with a couple of exceptions. So the main exception is that we can't fund any members who are based in Russia, Belarus, or China. And this is due to UK government restrictions on funding, because our funds for Validate come from the UK government. And Indian members, be aware that you count as high income, not low and middle income country. And this is a directive from your own government. They want to be classed as HIC. So do be careful of that. Okay, so the guidance document for the fellowship call, which is accessible on our website, has extensive details on eligibility beyond this as well. So please read this and the FAQs before emailing the Validate team with questions. We are happy to answer your questions, but please check that they're not already answered in the guidance document or the FAQ before you contact us, because I'm sure you can appreciate we have 660 members, so we can't individually help you all the time. It becomes just very onerous on, it's just Blakely and me. So if you would be able to check that, we'd really appreciate it. Obviously contact us though, if there's anything that doesn't make sense. Okay, so the research project that you're planning to propose for your fellowship needs to be scientifically excellent, and it needs to fall within Validate's remit to be eligible. So it has to be on one of the Validate focus pathogens. So that includes Mycobacteria, Leishmaniasis, and Burkholderia pseudomallii. Any other pathogens, when the project is focused on any other pathogens, so this includes malaria, COVID, any other skin NTDs, will be immediately rejected. They are outside Validate's remit. We do not fund other pathogens. Your project needs to focus on vaccine development. So this means anything, in Validate, this means anything that's directly vaccine development itself, but also any subjects or research areas that feed into vaccine development, such as basic immunology. And it also includes any biological, physical, or social science projects, as well as psychology, humanities, indeed any other research field are welcome. Again, as long as your topic feeds into vaccine development, into the vaccine development pathway, or into knowledge that would assist in vaccine development itself. So just to be aware that diagnostics projects can be funded under our remit because excellent diagnostics are needed to run effective vaccine clinical trials. You might want to, if you are putting a diagnostic project, make clear that link. But they would be a lower priority for funding beyond more vaccine-focused projects. So you need to weigh up whether it is worth your time putting in an application where you will already be a low funding priority compared to others. Balance up your time commitments. And then to flag that drug and therapy development, even for our pathogens, are outside Validate's remit. And again, projects that focus on drug or therapy development will not be funded and will be immediately rejected. So please think about that and don't waste your own time as well as ours in submitting applications that will just be immediately rejected. Your time is precious, don't waste it. Okay, and then to flag that if your research involves humans, animals, GMOs, or human samples, you'll need to address the ethical implications of this in your application in the right sections on the form. And I would highly recommend from seeing prior review sessions that you defend your sample size. So that's often a question that comes up. Okay, so in terms of the actual application form, you'll be able to find this again. The template is on our fellowship website page. It's pretty self-explanatory. So hopefully you can see my cursor, basically fill in your name, all the normal details. One thing to flag is that you do need to have a senior scientist, usually based at your own institute, who will act as your mentor and help you manage the project. So you need to get someone to agree to just basically help you, because we understand this will be your first project that you will be running and that you will be leading on. So you might need support in terms of someone to bounce ideas off, someone to talk about, are timelines appropriate? Are you sticking to times? What tips do they have? But particularly also managing budgets, how financial systems work in your institution. So you need to name a senior scientist, sponsor or mentor, as I say, usually at your own institute, but they don't have to be, who will support you in managing the project. In section 2, you're outlining your career to date, succinctly showing your experience in the research field. And then in section 3 and 4, you are giving, as the form suggests, the research project title and lay summary. These sections need to be non-confidential because they are posted onto the Validate website. So then section 5, the scientific abstract. This is the first impression the reviewer has of your project, so make it a good one. And then section 6 is where the nitty-gritty starts. So this is the main section where you're going to describe your proposed project. And this is your chance to sell your project and explain your plans in detail. So you want to include the scientific challenge that is being addressed, why it's an important question for the field, list clear objectives and milestones if relevant, perhaps hypotheses, state your methods with enough detail for the reviewer to be able to assess them. And if you have collaborators, explain how they add to your project. You can include references in this section. We'd recommend that to show that you've read around the field, but the references don't count towards your word limit. Okay, so then section 7 is your continuing professional development. So this is essentially how the fellowship will enhance your career, perhaps talking about your long-term career plans and how this fellowship will help you get there. Then in section 8, which is the pathways to impact, this is where you need to give the bigger picture of the importance of your research. So particularly talking about what impact your research findings would have, perhaps on the vaccine development pathway, perhaps referencing documents from WHO or other people that are appropriate for that, for your disease. Perhaps the impact your research findings would have on local or international development priorities, such as your local government aims and targets, or WHO sustainable goals. And also how you plan to move forwards after a successful project. So for example, how you would use the findings maybe to apply for a larger stage 2 project grant that would continue the work, if this was proof of concept, for example. Okay, and then section 9 covers the budget and resources justification. And I'm going to come back to this in more detail because the budget's quite complex, but essentially on the form, you need to make sure that you fill in the appropriate line. So salaries on the salary line, indirects on the indirect line. And the resource justification, you need to really drill down into enough detail so that the reviewers can follow your budget estimations and it all makes sense. So if, for example, I've seen people break it all the way down to it costs this much per flow cytometry sample. I am running 80 samples, 80 times that equals this much on flow cytometry. For example, for travel, it's a good idea to say what you're including there. So it might be, I have included a budget estimate to attend to present my results at one international conference in my second year. Something like that. You need to add a level of detail here that we can really understand how you've reached your numbers, that you're not just pulling numbers out of the air, that they are based on real science, and also that you're showing value for money for the grant. You'll also need to include any details of matched funding. So this is funding that comes from other sources, so perhaps, or in-kind contributions. So perhaps your institute might cover some of your salary, or you might have, I don't know, consumables available somewhere else, perhaps, I don't know. But if you have those sources, then do add that in there. Is a good thing to have matched funding and extra money. Okay, and then as I mentioned on the form, if you have using any human or animal samples or people in trials, for example, you need to address in section 10 the different ethical concerns about this. We've got lots of documents to refer to about this and our expectations for this in the guidance document for our fellowship. If you scroll down, you'll find there's a whole section on ethical parts, for example, GMOs or animal use or human use, and you should refer to international standards. You have to be operating at international standards, but following your local and international regulations and guidelines for appropriately. So you need to show that you're doing that in section 10. In section 11, you need to just list 2 to 3 preferred external mentors. We'll then try and assign you with one. So the idea of this is that in addition to your more local support, you'll have an external mentor, to give you another person in your network, but also there's someone who can objectively have an objective viewpoint of your project from outside your institute. They might have different views, and they will be able to, again, be a sounding board for you to bounce ideas off, talking about, maybe future funding ideas, future collaborations, future papers that you're writing, they might be able to help you with. So just choose 2 to 3 people who are validate investigators. You can find them on our website that you would like to have considered your mentor. We can't guarantee that we will assign you to one of those, but we will do our best to pick someone relevant for you, and we'll use the people you suggest as a starting point for that. Okay. Then section 12, reviewers, you just need to list if you have any conflicts of interest within our review panel. Again, conflicts of interest are listed in the guidance document, but essentially it's anyone on our NMB who works at your institute or that you've closely collaborated with previously. So just put them down and they'll basically be excluded from the review with a conflict of interest. And then section 13 is important. Ensure that you add the extra documents that we're asking for, particularly the relevant letters of support. And please stick to the page limits. So it's a 2-page CV maximum and a 1-page publication list maximum. And then, of course, don't forget to sign a date before you submit. And then please, can I request a big request from me? Please submit your application, all the documents in section 13 as one PDF document, your whole application as one PDF document, with all the different documents within that one document. It just makes things a lot quicker and easier on my side. I'm sure you can imagine if I'm doing 40, 50 applications where I have to turn everything into PDFs and then add them all into one document for the NMB review, it takes a lot of time. So gratefully appreciated if you could follow the guidelines on that, please. So this is where we get a little bit complicated. So if you've never done a budget before for UKRI, it is a little bit complex. So we're funded by UKRI, which is the UK government funding stream. So we have to follow their rules when we fund you for a fellowship. And this means the budget is quite complex. So read the guidance, and definitely I'd recommend getting support from your finance team. Many of them will be used to dealing with UKRI applications, and they'll be able to help you with these. So the important thing to note is that there are different allowances for LMIC or HIC applicants. So again, work out which one you are first. So for salary, both LMIC and HIC, you can cover up to 24 months of your salary. For UKROs, so UK research organisations, so that is any academic institute in the UK, so any university that's UK based, but also overseas, any overseas units linked to the MRC or an academic institute. So I suspect any of the Oxford University overseas units, you'll need to check with your finance people, but definitely the MRC London School units in the Gambia and Uganda, for instance, you count as UKROs. So the good news for the UKROs is you can add what's called the full economic costing, or FEC. This is the first time you've heard of it. Welcome to a rather complex thing for budgets. So this is something you will need to add to your applications. Please add it on a separate line so that you have your direct salary and your FEC broken out so that I can just see that they've been included. You will need to talk to your finance team. FEC is not something that you can calculate yourself. You'll need the computer systems to do it for you. Be aware it adds a lot of extra money onto your grant that basically goes to your institute. So it's kind of an overhead. So just have a big chat ahead of time when you pull together your budget with your finance team. Give them plenty of time because you may find you need to reduce things to be able to fit the FEC in. Okay, so you are allowed on your application to include consumables, so as well as lab consumables. This can include animal purchase, housing, sample shipment, etc. Again, just please put the consumables onto the separate lines as relevant on our application form. So for example, lab consumables is on one line, animal costs are on another. Again, just helps us work out what you're doing with your project and with your budget. So consumables for UKRI grants are anything that costs under £10,000. £10,000 or upwards counts as equipment, and that is not eligible on this grant. So you cannot put any single item of equipment that costs over £10,000. Okay, you are allowed a small amount of travel costs within your fellowship. So this is where it's appropriate. So this might be a cost for you to go to another lab for some tech transfer training. It might be travel costs to meet with essential collaborators, or it might be, as I say, presenting research at one international conference in year 2, for example. You need to make sure that your costs of travel are reasonable and they have to be economy class under this grant. So then you may have other direct costs, such as access fees that don't come under consumables or travel. And again, they just go in the other direct cost line, but please specify what you've added. So access fees for flow cytometer use, for example, so that we know what these are in the project budget table. Okay, so that's the same for everybody. When you get to, so for those who haven't done a budget before, you have direct costs, which are things you can buy. So salary and consumables and travel, but you also have what are called indirect costs or overheads. So these are costs that your institute incurs when you do research at your institute. So things like rent on the building, electricity, carpets, desks, computers, things like that. So these are indirect costs and overheads. So anybody who is a high income country applicant, you are not allowed to add any overheads. You will need to run this past your department because they may not be happy for you to apply where they can't get overheads, because it means they actually operate in reality at a loss. So you'll need to get permission probably to apply, but do check with your finance team. For LMIC applicants, we will allow a contribution towards overheads at your institute. You need to clearly show that it will assist in developing research capacity at your institute, and it must be a maximum of 20% of your budget, of your directly incurred costs. So it needs to be a reasonable amount. And I would justify it by explaining, perhaps it's standard at your institute, it's what they put on all grants or something like that. So do justify it carefully. Okay, so the other complicated thing with UKRI grants is their reimbursement rate. So by reimbursement rate, I mean the cost for your project, say your directs and indirect costs come to £100,000. That is the 100% cost for your project. So if you are an LMIC applicant or a HIC applicant who is not at a UKRO, you will be reimbursed at 100%. So your project costs £100,000, you will get £100,000. If your project costs £70,000, you will get £70,000. If you are a UKRO, or based at a UKRO, you will be reimbursed at 80% of your project costs. And this is because you have added FEC, which inflates the number. So you add FEC, but you then only get 80% of that. So if your project costs, so indirects plus directs plus the FEC costs £100,000, your institute will in reality only receive £80,000. And they have to make up that 20%. So this is why you need to talk to your finance team, because you will likely have to get approval for this grant to be submitted. Because again, they need to make sure they're not operating at a loss, and you've added enough salary and enough FEC to cover their overheads and to cover that 20%. Okay, so hopefully that will make sense. There are different maximum budgets as well for LMIC versus HIC, and this is because we recognise that high-income countries usually have much higher salaries expectations at their institutes. So LMIC applicants, your maximum budget is £100,000. High-income country applicants, your maximum budget is £150,000, and that is all in, indirects and direct costs. That's the maximum you can have. Anyone whose budget submits something with the budget over that, your application will be rejected. So make sure you bring your budget in under the appropriate amount. Okay, so I'm expecting lots of questions on that later because it is quite complex, but hopefully that is a nice overview for you of UKRI complexities in grants. Okay, so our application process, to give you a quick overview. So obviously the call is opened on 8th of January and will be open until the 8th of April. The call closes at 4 o'clock GMT on the 8th of April, and late applications, whatever the reason, will not be accepted. So make sure you get your application in on time. I then need some time to process the applications, so I check them for eligibility and completion, log them on our systems, send them to the NMB for review, and then collate all the NMB review responses ahead of their meeting, where basically I rank them for them based on their reviews. On the 7th of May, the NMB review meeting will shortlist for interview. Between the 8th and 22nd of May, I'll be sending out interview invitations, excuse me, and also letting anybody who is rejected at that stage know. In May and June, we will then hopefully have interviews, but obviously those dates will be confirmed nearer the time. And then June, July interview outcomes, the outcomes from the interview round will be sent out, either success or unfortunately rejection. And then we would hope that, as I say, those are kind of loose timelines. It all depends on availability of everybody, but we'll try and get through it as fast as we can. So we would hope that the fellowships would start around a month after the outcome letter gets to you, particularly because we're going to try and have the fellows that are newly awarded present your project and what you intend to do as a quick presentation at our 2024 annual meeting, which is obviously the 16th and 17th of July. So you're going to have very short notice on if that happens. So do put that date in your diary ahead of time, just in case. Okay, so I'm trying not to take up the whole hour because I want to get to everything else, but here are some tips and advice. So I've worked at Validate now for 7 years. I sit on the network management board and see all the reviews and input into them. I've also worked with Helen and various other people writing grants for 12 or so years now. And I have managed over £30 million worth of research grants. So these are my tips and advice with some experience. Start now. So you've got 3 months till the deadline in theory, but writing a good grant application takes at least that long. So start now. And do factor into your timeline potential delays that you can spot ahead of time. So for example, you'll need to give time for your letters of support for the person to write them and to get them from them. You'll need information from collaborators if you have them, which will take time. You'll need to send your budget to the finance team, discuss it with them. It may go back and forwards a number of times. Make sure you put enough time in your timeline for the back and forwards and revisions. And you will need to have your final application signed off by your institute if that happens at your institute. And that sometimes has a deadline. So for example, at Oxford, we have to give our central finance team at least 3 weeks for them to review and okay our applications. And our department finance team needs 2 weeks before that. So actually, our personal deadline for getting grants in is a whole 5 weeks before the actual grant deadline. So don't get caught out by that if there's something similar at your institute. build that into your timelines. Secondly, of course, make sure you're eligible. As I said, if your research is not within our remit, if you're not an associate member, you're going to be disqualified. So don't waste your time putting together an application that has no chance of success because you applied to somebody who can fund you. And read the guidance thoroughly, noting down as you do key facts that you need to make sure you follow and implement. Grant writing can feel overwhelming, so I'd recommend breaking it down into smaller goals. So rather than just thinking, right, I need to write the whole application today, break it down into I'm going to draft one section, perhaps a scientific abstract today, or I'm going to pull together my 2-page CV and get that up to date. And don't forget these additional documents. Your CV needs to be up to date. Your publications is only 1 page. Pick the key ones that showcase your research, showcase your experience in the field that you're writing your project about. The same with your CV. Make sure it's up to date, it's 2 pages, it's concise, it showcases you and your experience and reassures the reviewers that you can do this project and be the PI on it. As I said, stick to the rules. So the maximum budget, the maximum word limits, the CV page limit, etc. Otherwise, you just get disqualified and you're wasting your time. Write concisely, professionally, and for a knowledgeable but not specialist audience. So your reviewers are on the NMB, so they work in our field, in the research field, but they may not work on your particular pathogen, and they may not work on your particular specialty. So you want to write for somebody, to write your application and your project description particularly, so that somebody who is knowledgeable but not specialist can understand what you're planning to do and why. State clear project aims and objectives. Make sure, and perhaps hypotheses. Make sure your project is ambitious but feasible within the 2-year time frame. Make sure that you've read the relevant literature and you show that your project builds on current knowledge. You're not repeating something someone's already done elsewhere. And I'd really recommend getting plenty of other people to read your application, because when you're in it and writing it, it will make sense to you because you know what you mean. You want to get other people to read it to check it makes sense to someone who doesn't know all the background to your project. So an outside person, and they can also help check for inconsistencies, typos, errors, etc. Because you don't want to mar your application after all your efforts. And the final tips are, do not leave your submission to the closing date. So A, this causes you a lot of last minute stress that is just not worth it. But also, if something happens on the day of the deadline, you will miss the deadline and you will therefore be unable to, you'll have done all 3 months of work and not be able to submit your call. And I have seen people who cannot, have missed deadlines because of bad weather, meaning the internet went down, they got ill, their laptop broke. A big example was a big EU call a couple of years ago, where the online EU portal where you have to apply via crashed because so many people were using it on that deadline day. The EU does not extend their deadline. That was just tough. So do not leave it to the last minute. I really, really recommend it. And I personally like to submit any grant that we're involved in at least 48 hours before a deadline, because you can just breathe a sigh of relief, you know it's done, and you don't have to have last minute panic. And again, as for anything important, make sure you save your application as you write it on a central server, or that you back it up somewhere regularly. Do not just have it on your laptop, because you don't want to lose all your hard work at the last minute if your laptop dies or gets stolen or lost. Okay, so we're going to move on to also the LMIC extra support. So recognizing that our LMIC members can have less institutional support, and we want to encourage and support LMIC applications. So Validate's offering the following to our LMIC-based applicants. So the potential for a grant writing mentor, and we'll come on to that in a second with Helena. So register your interest with this by the 31st of January. Again, if you email after that point, too late, because Helena needs the time to help you write the grant application and help you shape it. And similarly, if English is not your first language, we may be able to offer translation services. Again, get in touch by the end of this month. This is something that interests you, because I need to just double check that we can in your language. And if you're working with Helena, it will need to be working in English. So some quick FAQs that have come up already. How do you know your membership level? So whether you're an associate, this is stated on your membership approval email. You can also always check your membership level via your Validate members biography webpage on our website. Can you upgrade to be an associate? If you pass your PhD, then you can apply to upgrade your Validate membership from affiliate to associate level, but at the time of application, you need to have passed your PhD. And again, if you want to know how to upgrade, look on our FAQ document on the fellowships, or look on our website for the joining instructions for Validate, because it's all on there. Can you apply if you've already received other Validate funding? You can't if you've had a fellowship, but otherwise, yes. Can you include collaborators? Yes, if they're relevant and bring something to your project. And they can have budget, or they don't have to have budget. Font size, anything legible, but I'd say the minimum would be a size 10 and leave white space, because otherwise it's a nightmare for your reviewers. And does your salary have to be 100% on this project? So when you're applying for a fellowship, we expect you to be concentrating on this project. That is, after all, the point of it. So we say that you would need to contribute at least 80% of your research time to your fellowship project, and you shouldn't be spending more than 20% of your time on non-research related activities or other projects, for example, clinical duties, teaching, or admin. So you may need to, again, agree this with your department in advance if you have lots of teaching commitments. Okay, so hopefully that answers a lot of questions. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, which will also address some more. Again, I'll also be updating the FAQ document, so do keep checking back to that. But if you do have any further questions that we don't address in this session, or in the FAQs, or in the guidance, then obviously do contact us at the Validate email address. And that hopefully is everything you need from me. So I will now hand over to Helena, who has very kindly agreed to give our LMIC members support with their grant writing for this fellowship call. Thank you, Helena.
Thank you very much, Sam. Lots of useful information you've already provided. And I must say, I agree with everything. So
thank you.
All right. So the funny last name that I have, Kuivaniemi, that comes from Finland. That's where I grew up and went to medical school. And then I spent 30 years in the United States working on research in different areas. And then the last 8 years or so, I have been here in South Africa near Cape Town. I really, really like grant writing. So I'm looking forward to helping you with your fellowship applications. And in the next slide, so the way it works is that we would have meetings, online meetings, to discuss your project and the details and set goals. And then I will agree to review and edit the documents that you provide. So I'll provide you feedback, and then we can discuss them also if something is not clear. So this includes everything that you have to put together for these applications, the different sections of the fellowship application, your CV, which can be only 2 pages, a list of applications, which can be only 1 page, the letters of support, which are very important from your research group leader and from the head of the department in your institution. And as Sam has already emphasized many times, we have to start early, so right away, I would say. The way it works is that you should contact Sam as soon as possible and indicate that you are interested in getting this support and working with me. And then she will review your eligibility. And if she thinks that you are eligible for this support and for the fellowship, then she will put me in touch with you, and then we'll go from there. I will contact you, set up the first online meeting, and we'll start working together. So this is free of charge for you. Validate Network will cover the cost, which is it's a wonderful service for you. But you are expected to work hard to submit a highly competitive application. So I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Helena. So yes, this is a fantastic opportunity for our LMIC members to work with Helena and get some real grant writing support and really valuable experience and input. But yes, as Helena says, you're going to be doing the work, fellows, not Helena. She's there to advise you, not write the grant for you. So please, do apply. We encourage you to sign up to this, but obviously only if you have a project in mind and you really, want to put an application in that will be highly competitive. So get in touch. Right. Next up is Nastasha. So Nastasha's based at Stellenbosch and is one of our current fellows. So she's going to just give a bit about her tips and her experiences as a Validate fellow. Thanks, Nastasha.
Hi. So I don't know if I've got many tips, but I can definitely say that I will miss being a fellow. It's been a fantastic experience. But the fellowship itself afforded me quite a few I want to say perks. So first off, I could leverage my fellowship award to get appointed as a researcher at Stellenbosch. And so this is really important for me because postdocs in South Africa don't count as employees, and therefore we are not eligible to apply for larger funding grants. So through this, I could now submit my first NIH grant application at the end of last year. And it also, having your own funding, your own contract, allows you to start establishing that independence with still being in a larger research group. So it kind of sets you up to get the foundation level data that you need to apply for a bigger grant. So then, yes, of course, with getting the fellowship and then getting your own contract comes a few project management learning experiences. And so negotiating with the contracts office, managing your own budget, and then also definitely managing your own timelines. And I see I forgot to say, with that comes your own delays and disasters. Then also, so being part of the Validate and specifically being a fellow, I've been included in a lot of events and meet and greets, and that's been really good for me. So just establishing a network within the community, and then being part of the NNB, which you'll be if you get the fellowship, exposes you to a whole new level of being an academic. So we've all reviewed papers before, but reviewing funding applications and travel grants as a junior researcher, that's quite an interesting point of view. And then seeing how the seniors discuss it before they make awards or decline awards is a very valuable learning experience. And then definitely my fellowship mentor has been fantastic. She is, well, an extremely accomplished woman, and getting one-on-one with a senior person that's accomplished a lot in their lifetime is very inspirational, but they also, through their past experiences, they can relate. And so sometimes you feel like my small issues are not that small, and they're really good for it. So next slide, please, Sam. Okay, so as mentioned before, networking has been great. I've used my funds to attend an international conference where I was invited to speak. So that was really, I think, my first international exposure as a speaker, and that was good. Then I got my second one at the annual meeting, and presenting online, as we've all done during COVID, is not the same as standing on a stage. At the end of last year, I was invited to attend the Validate One Mouth meeting, and that also afforded me exposure to I want to say a research group that I wouldn't normally have interacted with, and that gives you some fantastic, I can't find the word. Anyway, and then also through the Validate, I've been invited to attend a CTVD meeting funded by the Gates Foundation, and that was an experience of a lifetime. I'm sure many of the ECDN members will agree with me. So unlike the next fellow, I was part of the Early Career Researcher Network, and this was a group of female researchers within the early stages of their career. And in this network, we were allowed to attend workshops that focused on a lot of soft skill development that is very necessary for your, I almost want to say, establishing you as a leader within your field. And then also I got to network with these ladies. So we've built a network and a friendship, and hopefully in the future we'll all work together. But then also the life coaching sessions that came with that. It sounds silly, but it's almost been one of the most valid or valuable things that I've had in the past 2 years. And you don't realize it, but the way you speak about yourself definitely impacts the way that you see yourself, even on a subconscious level. So I could definitely give you that. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Nastasia, and thank you for the plug. So that is the Validate ECR Career Development Network is our ECDN, and we will be having a new ECDN cohort program start later this year. So watch this space for that. Right, and then I'm going to hand over to, hopefully if I stop sharing, a few seconds, Christian. There we go. Hand over to Dr. Christian Seguera Cerda, based in Mexico, who's our other current fellow. Thanks, Christian.
Thank you so much. Nice to see all the interested person in this fellowship. Just to add some information to these comments, I want to say that all the review process which involves this fellowship is very friendly during the application process. The environment of evaluation of the fellowship is always looking for the scientific excellence. And this is very important to be in mind of you. Always you will have the opportunity to explain your ideas. You have not much time, but you have enough time to explain your ideas, and you will be able to give all the to receive all the feedback about your application. Then I think this is a very good thing about this process of application. Then you can be relaxed about the process of application. I think other advantage you have by being a Validate fellowship is the freedom to conduct your own research, which is not common to have during your PhD or your postdoc. This is the first time you will have to manage the time, the cost of your project, and of course you will have to give the reports to Validate, but you will be able to manage all the resources related to the project, which is a very good thing for early career researchers. In my case, it was the first time that I had the opportunity, and it was really crazy, but I gained a lot of experience in this field. Then after all this process of learning, I finally got a permanent position as a scientist. Then this is a product you will have of your fellowship by following Validate. I think other important thing is that you will not be alone during the process. As Natasha said, you will have a mentor, and it is not like a PI nor like a boss. It's like a friend who you can talk to and tell your advances in the project and consult your queries. And it's a friend, a scientist friend who you can tell all your things. And this is a really helpful thing from Validate. You will not be alone. You have your independence as a new early career researcher, but you're not alone in the process. And the final thing that I want to highlight is that the management team of Validate is always in touch with you to help you, in particular if you are in a LMIC country, to understand the laws, to understand the institution you are working on, to adapt the agreements, to adapt the way you will conduct your research. Then be confident that Validate always will offer you the support you will need to perform your project. Then as a final reminder, be concrete, consist with your application to help the reviewers to give you a just evaluation, and all the best for your applications.
Oh, thank you, Christian. Fantastic. So thank you very much to Helena, Nastasia, and Christian for their help in running this seminar for you all. So I'm now going to open to the floor for questions. So if you want to put your hand up, we'll take questions. And I'm going to try and keep track. So if you have a question, please put up a hand or put it in the chat. Thanks, Blakely, for answering that. Anyone got any questions? Be brave. Now is your opportunity. Wow. Okay. Excellent. It seems like I've answered all questions. Aha, Naomi.
Hello. I was just letting others have a chance before I jumped in there, but
go for it.
I just have a question on so for some grants and particularly fellowships, it's looked more favorably upon if you have, say, a collaborative project or a multidiscipline project. But as this one is kind of more of a starting out sort of grant, do you think that would be an advantage or less advantageous to have it be collaborative or multidiscipline?
So I would say so far, I think most of our fellows have not been collaborative projects, or they've had a small collaboration. So I don't think it's a crucial factor. I think if it's relevant to your application, then by all means include them, but I don't think you would be penalised for not having a collaborator, because the idea is, you know, you're focusing on your project. Does that help?
Yes, thanks.
Basically, it needs to be scientifically excellent. That's the key criteria.
Got it.
Okay, and then in terms of the question on the chat from Hazim, HIC LMIC status, you'll see in the guidance. It's based on where you are based at your institution. It's not citizenship, it's where your institution is based or where you are based for the research. Tao Tai, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, I also had some other questions, but I'll start with the one in the chat, which was, I was wondering if the budget could be partly allocated to pay up top-ups from local staff that would be working in a clinical center where you're doing the clinical study. And if we could also use some of the budget for patient reimbursements for entering the clinical study.
Okay, sorry, I didn't spot your question in the chat. Okay, so definitely you can, if you can fit a patient involving study in the budget, by all means, patients should be compensated appropriately, so do include that. In regards to the top-up, I would need to check that. So I will check that and I'll add the answer to the Q&A, and I will try and remember to email you, so let me just write the name down. But I will need to just double check that.
Great, thank you.
That's all right. So top-ups for local.
I have a question.
Give me 2 seconds. Blakely, can you just take a photo of the chat for me so that I definitely have that question?
Yeah, but it's also it's also saved anyway. But yeah,
Oh, perfect. Thank you. No, that's great. Okay, Guesh, I'm very sorry if I'm pronouncing people's names wrong. Go ahead with your question.
Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, thank God. Go for it.
Okay. If you look at the form, the application form you shared, if you look at 9.1, the project budget, beneath it, you see if your project includes costs for collaborators, please list each institute cost separately. So please, may you throw more light on this? I don't get it clearly. Will I need to get a separate chart or a separate column?
So just,
because I have.
Yes, so add the lines that are there, so salary, consumables, indirects, total, etc. Basically copy them and make one section of that all the costs for your institute, then have the repeated section for all the costs for the other collaborator institute, and then have a total at the bottom for both institutes together.
Okay, because I'm intend having like 5 institutes, including my own institute, so making a total of 6.
Yeah, so you would need to have the budget broken out for, we need the budget breakdown for each institute.
Okay, that's one. Let me ask another question. Then if you go down for the 14 signature, you see.
I'm sorry, you're getting a little bit quiet. Can you speak a little bit more closely to the microphone?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, if you look at number 14 for signature, who is going to sign? Is it me as a lead applicant?
Yes.
Am I the one that's going to sign?
Yes.
Okay. So another thing is this: the group leader. Is it compulsory that I must be from my own institution?
Yes.
Is it must?
Yes. So most people who are postdocs, which is what who this call is appropriate for, would be currently part of a research group. So your research group leader would need to give support for your fellowship and the time that you will take out to work on your fellowship project. If you do not have a group leader like that, then you definitely need your line manager support. So we'd need a letter of support from your line manager, in addition to a letter of support from the head of department, which more confirms that the department and the institute are happy to host you as a fellow and your research at the institute.
Okay, all must be from my institute, not from my collaborators.
No, so they need to be from your institute.
Okay, thank you.
If you have collaborators, letters of support from the collaborators would probably be good to include, but yeah, so just add those as extra documents.
Okay.
But yeah, you definitely have to include letter of support from your line manager. Usually that's the research group leader, and then from your head of department. Ishmael Tuka, do you need to ask a question? Because your microphone is on at the moment. Thank you. Blakely, can you mute if not? Thank you. Tao Tai, I'm very sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong.
No, that's fine. It happens a lot. But a question I had was, is there a possibility to extend your starting date? Because you would see, if successful, one would receive the awards in July, but that means that in July you would start your fellowship already. Is there a possibility to extend it, for example, until 2025?
The start date till 2025, no. So you would need to start the project ideally within a month of getting the contract from us, the contract draft and the award letter. That's just because these things get drawn out if you don't have a deadline. It can take months. So ideally a month. We want you to really push your contracts team, and I'll be pushing ours to try and get it set up as soon as possible. Because the whole point is, this project's worthwhile. You want to get started with it. You don't want it to, keep pushing out. But we understand, obviously, there are contractual challenges, and that it may take a little bit more time than that. I would say 3 months is the maximum, because we need this money to go to you, basically. And we need to get the project started for various reasons. Does that make sense? Yeah, so you can't push the start date to 2025. Would need to start not more than 3 months after July. So yeah, September 2024 latest start date, I'd say. Okay.
Then a last question. What has been the success rate in the past for these grants?
That's putting me on the spot. Memory. It's a very good question. So the first round, we had a few applications and none of them got funded because they weren't high enough level. The second round, we had we were quite small a network. So I mean, it is a good grant to go for. It has got a good success rate. So I think we maybe had 10 applications and 2 were funded. So good success rate compared to other ones. And then the last round, where, as I say, because the network keeps building, I would expect that we would have more. We had maybe more like 15, 20 applications and 2 were funded. So I would expect in this round, we will have probably, especially with some of the support and more members that we have, probably around 30 projects, at least, applications. And we have 3 or 4 awards to be able to make at the moment. So it's a very good success rate, much better than if you apply to Wellcome Trust or MRC or any of the big fellowship calls. So if you are within our remit, I'd highly recommend you go for this. And you get lots of perks, like joining our management board, which you don't get with other grants. So go validate. Right, that was a bit of a plug.
No, great, thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Luciana.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I just was wondering if someone who has a permanent position can still apply for this fellowship, maybe, as you mentioned, by providing a kind of authorization, being capable of using 18% of the time for this project. But is it compulsory to request for salary?
Is it compulsory to what? Sorry?
To request for salary?
If your salary is covered elsewhere, so for example, in the institute, then no, just explain that in the resource justification. But you will obviously need to clear with your institute that they are happy for you to work at least 80% of your time on your fellowship project. This should be the main focus of your research going forwards. So you would be welcome to apply, and you can certainly have your salary paid elsewhere if you're in that lucky position. But just make sure you make that very clear in your application, and that you have confirmed that your institute are happy with that change of priority. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ahmed, do you have a question?
Yeah, my question is regarding the salary for the fellowship. Okay, only the fellow can avail the salary, or can any technicians or any PhD scholars can be used for assistance, and they can be paid with the salary?
Okay.
Is that allowed?
So you can have research assistants salaries included on your project if A, you can fit it in the budget, and B, it's appropriate. The reviewers will expect you to be doing the vast majority of the research and work, because that is the whole point of a fellowship. So the whole point is it is your project, your baby, you're, you know, focusing on it. You're the one driving the project and driving, you know, the research and the research ideas. So we would expect to see you doing the majority of the research. But if it's appropriate, relevant, especially if, you know, you're trying to get through a lot of research for 2 years and a research assistant would help you with the workload, then that salary could be included, you know, as long as you can fit it in within the maximum budget. Hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Great. Membera work, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Do we need supervisor from UK or from our institute?
So as I said, you need to list a senior scientist, preferably at your institute, who will be able to support you. So this might be your current group leader or your head of department or another scientist, senior scientist in your department, who can help you navigate managing a project at your institute. That's why. So how the finance team work and advise you on, you know, lab space and stuff like that. Things that PIs have to face that you may not have come across before. So that would be the ideal. Ideally, they would be based at your institute. The mentor, so the second person, external mentor, can be based anywhere. So that's a Validate member who would be your external support, basically, and they can be anywhere.
Okay, thank you. The other question, is age considered in this fellowship as far as you are early career?
Is what, sorry?
Age.
Age, no. So this is targeted at early career researchers. We don't give an age limit because we recognize that different people have different personal challenges. They may or may not have had kids. They may or may not have caring responsibility to parents or other family members. Different people have different career paths. So at Validate, we don't put an age limit on our fellowships. However, you would need to show that you are still an early career researcher, you know, like that it's an appropriate fellowship call for you.
Okay, thank you.
That's right. It will be assessed by the reviewers, essentially. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly look through some of the questions to check on the chat that I haven't missed anything. That one. Okay, so many of us are postdocs. Can fellows switch institutes during the course of the fellowship? So we would expect that the fellowship would, you know, by your institution agreeing to house you as a fellow, that you would stay at the institute. That would kind of be the point to build your career there. But it would not be a complete deal breaker to change institutions. It would just be a bit unusual. Like we would expect the institution supporting your application to be supporting you for the 2 years and helping you progress your career at that institution. So I hope that helps. Okay. I've already mentioned this. Does having a fellowship from another agency make us ineligible? Yes. So I think if you had another fellowship from somewhere else, that you would be ineligible, because again, the whole point of a fellowship is it's helping you progress to being a PI. So we would expect that the prior fellowship would have helped you do that. Do we need a consent letter from Validate mentors? Okay, so the Validate mentor, you're just giving me 2 to 3 names of people that you would like. I will then approach them and check they're happy before I connect you. So you don't need to contact the Validate mentor. You're nominating 2 to 3 people you think would be useful partners for your research project or your personal circumstances. You don't need to contact them. I'll then sort it out our side. But obviously the institutional supporter, yes, you should. You don't need a consent letter, but you should obviously chat to them and get their agreement to it. Okay. Can applicants allocate Validate funds to research costs while receiving stipends from their current PI? Yes, so that covers that we've covered. If you have salary elsewhere, that is okay, but state that and make it very clear why and etc. Thanks, Christian. Okay, will the complete budget be allocated to the host institute? I'm going to make this the last question because I realise we are over time. Will the complete budget be allocated to the host institute after contract, or will this be done in parts? Okay, so this depends on the institute, and we would have this discussion during the contract if you were successful. We recognise, so normally Validate pays in arrears, which means you do 6 months of research at your institute, and then your institute bills us for the actual costs for that 6 months. However, And that's how we would work with most HIC institutes, for example. However, we recognise that at low and middle income country institutes, this may not be possible in terms of your institute's cash flow. So when you were awarded, we would have a conversation, and there is some flexibility about that. So for example, with previous fellows, we have done part of the budget up front, and then you get installments as you progress through the timeline of the project itself. So I hope that that helps. So it will depend, as I say, once you're awarded, that would be part of the contractual discussion, but we would certainly do our best to support what your institute and you need financially your side. Try and be flexible. Okay. For how long LMIC members stay or get training at external validate investigator laboratory? Well, I don't. That's an interesting question. I think I'm going to check that before I answer. I've got an idea of what the answer would be, but I'm going to just check that, and I'll put it in the FAQs and I'll email you, Kieran, because I don't know whether we would make a hard ruling on that. So I will just check with our management board as to whether they would have expectations around that before I give you the wrong information. Okay, so I see we've slightly overrun. Apologies for that. Thank you very much for those of you who've hung around to hear all the answers. I hope that that has addressed a lot of your queries and perhaps concerns about the fellowship call. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I really hope that we look forward to receiving lots of applications from you all. Great. So Blakely has said that this will be, thank you, Helen, that the recording of this will be made available on YouTube if you need to kind of recap. And as I said, if you do have any questions that we haven't addressed that come up afterwards, then just drop an email at validate@ndm.oxford.ac.uk. It's on our website if you can't remember that. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to close the call now. Have a good rest of your day.